What Else with Corey Mann on the Studio DNA Podcast Network. One-on-one conversations with some of your favorite artists. Find this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and Spreaker.com. What Else with Corey Mann on the Studio DNA Podcast Network.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 26 of Disney Plus Reviews. I'm one of your co-hosts, Phil Souza, and I'm here with my co-host, my good friend, and the guy who's never afraid to go rogue. It's Jack Ultramat. What's happening, Jack?
I am K2SO, and I can't believe we're talking about this blasted movie. Sorry, I was trying to do my best agitated droid impression, but it wasn't very good, was it?
No, it wasn't.
Would you say it was horrible? Would you say it was really bad?
No, not terrible. I mean, I think any voice can be a good droid voice. But,
oh, okay, thanks.
But yeah, that's about the most positive thing I could say about that.
Oh, okay.
Well, if you're just joining us for this podcast, first I want to tell you we are an unofficial Disney Plus podcast reviewing the most popular stuff on Disney Plus. You might say we're a little skewed towards Star Wars, and that may just be because we covered every episode of The Mandalorian. We've been covering every episode of Star Wars: The Clone Wars, and now we're talking about Rogue One as well. It's because we love Star Wars, and we're not going to apologize for that. We have covered some other movies as well, and television shows even. Covered the High School Musical, the musical series, one of our more popular episodes. So go back and listen to some of those other things, especially if you're just now getting into Disney Plus. Maybe with COVID-19, you've been inspired to take the Disney Plus plunge. And so we want to invite you to listen to all those episodes. This is our 26th episode, so there's quite a few things to go back to. Definitely go back and watch The Mandalorian if that wasn't the very first thing that you plugged in on Disney Plus, and listen to those episodes as we recap and review those. Today on the show, we are, as I mentioned already, we're going to talk about Rogue One, the 2016 Star Wars movie. This movie, if we're going to spoil it, so if you're listening to this and you haven't seen it, we're going to spoil every aspect of the plot. We're just going to talk about our favorite moments and kind of go over the plot of the movie and character deaths and everything that goes on. So if go back and watch that movie if you don't want to be spoiled, if you don't care about spoilers, if you've already seen it, obviously listen on from this point forward. But the story basically takes place right before the events of the original Star Wars movie, Episode 4, A New Hope. And it's telling the tale about the building of the Death Star and the initial theft of the plans for that superweapon. So I watched it this last week again. I had not seen it since, I think I had lied last episode. I think I said I'd seen it twice. I don't think that's the case. I think I'd only seen it one time before this week. So this is my second viewing. I watched it with my wife, Jessica, and it was her first viewing. She had never seen it, and got some of her thoughts. And I'll probably plug those in as we go along as well. But, cool. Jack, what's your history with the movie? Did you get a chance to watch it again this week? Who in your household has seen it?
We've all seen it in the household. I probably watched it 3 times total. Saw it initially in the theater. I feel like this may be, and I think there are a lot of people that think this, maybe the best and maybe the most critically appreciated Disney Star Wars movie that they've come out with. I think that
from 2015 on, basically,
yes, of them bankrolling movies for Disney, for Star Wars. I think that it is very smart. I think it's hilarious that one topic that is, several Bothan spies lost their lives getting us these plans. That's said in A New Hope, I believe.
So I had to look that
It's-
up this week because
yeah.
I thought that as well. It so technically, and here's the story on that phrase. Let's just get into it, and then we'll get
Yeah.
into the movie.
I just think it's funny. To finish my thought, I just think it's funny that an entire movie is based around just that one snippet of a thought process.
So it's not actually. I know I'm gonna totally burst that bubble, and I apologize, but
This is a Mandela effect situation again. Then.
yeah, it is actually totally Mandela. That phrase is from Return of the Jedi, Episode 6 of the Star Wars movies, and it's in reference to the second Death Star. So it is in reference to a Death Star, but not the Death Star that you're thinking
How
of.
about that?
Yeah, I had to look that up because I told Jessica the same thing. I said there's a phrase. I was like, I can't quite quote it. I couldn't even remember the word Bothan. I said, there's something about spies, and many of them had to die or whatever to get these plans or whatever. And I looked it up so I could find the actual clip and the actual quote. And yeah, sure enough, it's not from A New Hope at all. It's from Return of the Jedi about the second Death Star. So I did not. I think you're not alone, though. I think millions of people thought that going into Rogue One.
I mean, think about it. I mean, I'm just like, I'm telling you, there's another reality where that is the case.
Yeah. So yeah,
good time.
So it's not about that phrase. However, there are plenty of references in New Hope to these people, not explicitly like their names or anything like that, but as we know, the very first scene that everyone has seen at this, if you're a human being, you've seen the first opening scenes of A New Hope, and it is basically Darth Vader storming onto they like tractor beam this ship, and he storms onto the bridge of the ship, and he's like, where are the plans? And he's like, choking people and killing people, and he encounters Leia Organa, and he's like, I know you have the plans, I know you know where they are. She's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And she's like, I'm just a imperial senator on a mission to blah blah blah. And he's like, you are a rebel spy, take her away. And so like but basically this is in reference to that. So like he believes at the beginning of A New Hope, he believes that he even uses the word transmitted, which I thought was really cool. But yeah, he says plans of a weapon that we're building were transmitted to this ship, and I'm here to basically take those back. And this whole movie was basically all about how did that happen. So
how about that?
Cool.
Really cool. And the acting is solid in this movie. The droids are great. The all of the characters that they kind of bring to the forefront. They introduce new characters, which is really, really hard in a very old franchise to introduce new characters that you actually care about. No spoilers, but at the end of the movie, man, I don't want to say you're bummed, but you might be bummed. But it's one of those where it's like, I really liked this movie when I first saw it, and I like it every time I've seen it since. So,
yeah. Not only had Jessica not seen this movie, as I referenced earlier, she had not even heard of any of the plot. Like she had somehow not been spoiled on anything with it. And I already gave a spoiler warning, so we're just going to go ahead and jump into the end of the movie here. If you haven't turned that back by now, it's too late. But at the end of the movie, when basically, Biggs and Wedge and a few others survive. Anyone that was in a ship basically has a chance of survival at the end of this movie. But everyone that's on the planet's surface is toast. Totally toast, literally burned alive at the end of this movie. And she did not see that coming. She did not. She's like, I thought they were going to get away. So
burnt to a crisp.
Yeah. So definitely a surprise, I think, to her. I think, for us, like big Star Wars fans, like I think we were expecting that, this is not going to go well for them. And, if any of these main like named characters survives, why didn't we see them in future movies? Like, it's a prequel. So
right. And you kind of knew that was going to happen the way it was going down. So that makes sense.
Yeah. I looked at the Rotten Tomatoes scores on all the Disney Star Wars movies. The Force Awakens, 93%. Very, very high, one of the highest ever. The Last Jedi, 91%. I know you don't agree with that, but very highly reviewed. And The Rise of Skywalker, a dismal 52% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Which actually, I think I agree with that one less than than the Last Jedi one, but yeah.
And then Rogue One, higher than Rise of Skywalker, but lower than The Last Jedi and lower than The Force Awakens, 84%, which is respectable. I mean, that's a pretty high score.
Right.
So,
does it have the fan ranking? Because I'm a little more privy to the fan ranking than I am the critic ranking on those.
Yeah, audience score is 86, so a couple more percent.
Yeah.
So I honestly, like, especially watching it again this last week with Jessica, it just solidified for me. It's a top 5 Star Wars movie.
Yeah, it's really good.
I really like it a lot.
Yeah, it's really, really good. So
cool. Well, let's
it.
kind of get into some of the details. I think I'll just kind of do some like kind of quick sentence or two summaries for all the different paragraphs on Wikipedia. We did this last time, and I thought it worked pretty well. Just kind of taking the Wikipedia page and just kind of talking about some kind of big. We did this for Willow. I think it worked well.
Yeah,
so,
it makes it a lot easier. Yeah.
So the very first, we'll talk about the kind of the pre-scene where the main character is just a child. She's like a 10-year-old girl or whatever. It's Galen Erso and his family on some planet, and we see the bad guy at the very beginning of the movie, which is very A New Hope, like the very open seconds of A New Hope, you see Darth Vader. So, from the very beginning who the bad guy is going to be. Krennic shows up, and he is trying to get Galen Erso to come and complete the Death Star. I wasn't clear. Had he already been working on the Death Star at this point? And
no, he just
quit.
His technology. Maybe I think he had realized that it was they were taking. It's kind of like an Einstein situation where they were taking his creation, his thought process, his technology, and twisting it into a weapon. It's like Einstein later in his life regretted a lot of his atomic stuff, because like his research in atomic theory and everything else, because people took it and turned it into a weapon.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so he's saying, I need you to come back and help us finish the Death Star. He's like Galen Erso is like the smartest guy in the room type of scientist. And he says, I need you to come back. He refuses, and they end up killing Krennic and his stormtroopers end up killing Galen's wife in front of their daughter, who's like hiding in the bushes or grass. And she ends up seeing her mom killed and her dad taken into captivity, and she basically runs and is able to escape.
Well, and she was taught to if someone shows up, you go hide in this bunker area that we've got, which is pretty effective. And then she is somehow Saw Gerrera is alerted to go pick her up.
Yeah, I don't know if they fully explained that, except did they explain that later? Like Galen sent him or something? Somehow got a message to him?
Yeah, possibly.
Somehow Saw Gerrera, who's this he's an extremist. Like he's a rebel, but he's also on his own. He's essentially a rogue, to use the title of the movie. But and they're killing a lot of people. Like you kind of get the impression that they don't really care who they hurt or who gets caught in the crossfires. Sure. The Empire has to go down, type of thing. So he's on the side of the rebels, kind of, but he also keeps his distance from them, and vice versa. But he takes her in and basically becomes his ward. Like, he raises her as his own daughter, basically, from that point on. And then it cuts hard from there and goes into, we see other characters for a while. The next time that we see Jyn, she is no longer with Saw, and I think some of the details of that kind of, barely get touched on, but they kind of get explored. The rest of the timeline between her and Saw kind of get figured out later in the movie. But we learn later, basically, to find out that she ended up leaving him. I think it's 16 or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And bails on him, and then hasn't seen him since. And I think she's like 20 or 21 or whatever. It seems like when the normal events of this movie take place. So
right.
She lives with him for a while, becomes disenfranchised with him and his movement, and then end up getting separated. So at that point, sorry, this is 15 years later. Okay, so it's been quite a long time. I kind of get the impression she's maybe about 10 or so in that first scene. So maybe she's 25.
Right.
When the rest is. And this is boy, they worked on that Death Star for a long time. I think we're already part way in the production of it, and then 15 years later, they're almost finished with it, but not quite finished with it. So 15 years have passed. We see Bodhi Rook. He defects from the Empire. He's like a pilot guy. It reminded me a lot of Finn, kind of like a
little bit, yeah.
Like was working with the Empire, but ends up escaping away from them, getting away.
Yeah, has a good heart. Knows that it's not the Empire is not a good thing whatsoever. Even though they run the galaxy, that doesn't mean that doesn't make them good. Yeah.
He's a pilot for the Empire, but basically his mission is to take this holographic message. He's basically R2-D2, transport this message recorded by Galen to Saw. So like Galen and Saw have this relationship, and he's like, get this message to Saw Gerrera.
You're our only hope.
You're our only hope, Saw. Help me, Saw. Let's see, Rebel Alliance. I'm reading some of this because I don't remember some of the early stuff. Rebel Alliance intelligence officer Cassian Andor learns of the Death Star from an informant and frees Jyn from an Imperial labor camp at Wobani. I don't remember how they introduced that scene. I do remember her being transported in that little.
She's in that transport. They show up. They blast her out of there, and then they just come get her. They know that. I think.
They find out that the message is en route to Saw, or it's been delivered to Saw.
Yeah,
I don't remember how they find that out, but
they're after her. They know that she's in that transport. Does Saw send for her?
I don't think so. I think they just like see her name, like that she's Jyn Erso. She's traveling under a different name, but somehow they use their intelligence to figure out that her last name is Erso, and that she's the daughter of Galen Erso, who is known. Somehow the Republic knows that he is a defector wannabe. Like he's working at an Empire base, but he's not keen with the Empire and wants to betray them, and has sent a message to Saw. Somehow I think they learn all that information, and they obviously have really bad relationship with Saw Gerrera, to put it lightly. And so they're like, hey, if we can break out Jyn Erso from imprisonment, she can be our key to unlock that door and get into a meeting to set us up with a meeting with Saw.
Right.
Saw Gerrera. So
Saw, not Che Guevara, but Saw Gerrera.
Which, by the way, when I saw this originally when it first came out, Saw Gerrera was a new character to me. I'd never heard of him, and at that point, I went with a friend, Ryan. Ryan and I went to the theater to go see this. It was his second time watching it. I think that's what I was trying to remember.
That's cool.
He had seen it like 2 days before, and he's like, "I'm going to go see it again." He loved it. It
made $1 billion at the box office, which is like, that's kind of surprising. That shows you that generally people like this movie.
Yeah. He was one of the ones that was over the moon with it. No pun intended. That's no moon. But yeah, he was over the moon with this Death Star creation story, and so he said, "Yeah, let's go watch it together. I want to see it again." So anyway, I wasn't familiar with Saw Gerrera. Now that I've watched the Clone Wars, when we first saw. When Jessica and I were watching it together, I hit pause on the movie just to tell her a little bit about Saw Gerrera, because he's a big part of a 4-episode, I want to say, story arc in
Clone Wars.
Season 4 or 5, can't remember. And he's basically a part of the political uprising that happens on his planet, where the Republic doesn't want to get involved because it would break all kinds of treaties and outstanding treatises that they have with this particular planet. So they're like, hey, we can only interface with the recognized leader of this planet, and since you guys are trying to overthrow him, we can't help you with that. But nudge, nudge, wink, wink, we're going to send Ahsoka as like a counselor to you guys to like help you through this situation. But they're also telling Ahsoka not to attack. Like they're like, hey, you need to like kind of lead them from the shadows. Like we want the Civil War to end up with the rebels winning, but we don't want it to be known that you're helping them. And so it's a really cool story. Saw Gerrera is like just kind of a grunt at the beginning of it. Like he's just like a pawn, like in that army, but then becomes like one of the major leaders, I think, after one of the leaders is killed or taken or something like that.
Right.
And so you get to kind of see his story, but it's obvious that that's obviously 15 years before the events of this movie. He's seen some stuff at this point, and he's pretty crazy by the time he gets to this movie. So let me ask you that before we get into the rest of the story here. What's your take on Saw's persona at this point? Is he insane, or is he just eccentric?
I think he's physically beat down, being just a regular dude that over time gets just beat up physically. He has a respirator thing. He's I think for all intents and purposes part machine, which is part of that same kind of mythos that is Star Wars, that makes Star Wars so great. The ability for people to have some sort of weird augmentation and makes their character have that much more depth. I think he is as much of a political leader, basically, for their movement as much as anything else. And he is a rebel, but he also is looking out to save people that are immediately surrounding him too, like, and in a good way, like not like looking to better himself in the process, but looking to help people. And he's always been kind of sold out for the cause, and I think he still is. His death at the end, his death is an interesting one, and it's one of those where it's basically a sacrifice that almost didn't have to happen, but I think he was ready to die.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think it had to happen at all. I in the same way that Jin and the rest of them.
There was time for him to escape.
Yeah, it's a little confusing, his death. I think you just have to chalk it up to what you already said, which is he'd fought and scraped for everything he had ever gotten at that point.
Yeah, he's just really beat down.
I think he's just tired.
Yeah, we get a very worn down Saw Gerrera, like very worn down. So
yeah. So basically, get back to the plot. Jin, we're not even at that planet yet. We're still at the rebel base. So they break Jin out of captivity, take her to the rebel base on Yavin 3 or whatever, or Yavin 4, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And they take her in front of everyone, including the Mon Mothma, the female leader that you see in other Star Wars properties. And they are saying like, hey, we know where your dad is, and he's in danger. We need to rescue him. And we also need you to get us an audience with Saw, kind of lay everything out. And then after she leaves, they kind of whisper to Cassian, hey, we want you to kill Galen, which I think is kind of dirty, but they are, you can tell it's a desperate rebel alliance at this point. Like they're willing to do whatever it takes to preserve their way of life. So
they know that if the Death Star gets created, that they're not going to have any chance.
It's over.
Yeah, they're just not going to have any chance. So.
Yeah. They get word that this thing has the planet killer is what they call it. Like it has this ability to destroy an entire planet with one shot. So they go to Jeddah, which when I remember watching this movie in theaters, I was like, did they say Jedi? Like, I think it's unfortunate that the name of the planet is called Jeddah, because I think it's really confusing for people who aren't, to the uninitiated, what's going on there. But it's just a planet called Jeddah. It sounds like Jedi, but it's just a planet in the galaxy.
Well, did it have a former? Well, it's one of the name Jedi, you got to think it has some derivation from it, though.
Could, yeah.
Because
there was a temple there.
Well, there's a lot of kyber crystals. That's where kyber crystals come from.
Yeah.
So I think that I'm going to make believe that the name is synonymous for
With
good.
Jedi?
Yes, Jedi crystals, delicious Jedi crystals.
Have you seen Jeddah in any other Star Wars property? I don't think it ever comes up in the Clone Wars.
No, there's not really a. This literally is the only use of Jeddah.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with it at all.
No.
But what we know about this place is there was a former temple. It's been not destroyed, but like ransacked, and all of the guardians and the priests and stuff like that from this temple have been run aground, basically. And the temple, one of its primary purposes was to protect the kyber crystals, which any Star Wars fan knows that kyber crystals are very integral to lightsabers.
Yes.
They're basically what makes lightsabers possible, to make time travel possible. And they're basically like emptying the planet of every kyber crystal. They're very brutishly just removing every crystal from the planet, one transport ship at a time, and just extracting everything they can get out of it. And Gerrera and his guys have basically been in this big armed battle with them. They kill us, we kill them, back and forth forever. And we're introduced Jen, Cassian, and K2SO, who's this funny character. He reminds me a lot of C-3PO as far as he's very I think a lot of droids are like this, but he's very just say what he means, say what he thinks kind of thing. Like he doesn't check anything.
Matter of fact, they can't not do that. You're right.
Yeah. He's voiced by Alan Tudyk, which obviously he's great with sci-fi just in general, but very funny. And I think he was a great fit for that character.
He's awesome. He's awesome.
And so they go onto the planet and they're like, okay, we got to find the Saw guy and figure out what the message is and what's going on. In the midst of all this, we see two other characters who are two of my favorite characters in the entire movie. I'm probably going to mispronounce the first one's name, but the blind spiritual warrior is what they call him on Wikipedia. He's essentially kind of a Jedi, but not a trained Jedi in any way, shape, or form.
He believes in the Force.
He says he's not really influenced by it.
He is, but he's not trained.
Right.
So he is, drum roll please. Is it Baz?
No, that's the big guy with the railgun type thing.
Son of a buck.
This is Chirrut Imwe. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right at all, because they almost never say his name in the movie. I think they mention it once or twice.
Wow.
Chirrut is how it looks. Chirrut. But he's this awesome. He's blind. He's blind as a bat. Can't see anything, but has this bow staff. Kind of think Donatello from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and obviously extremely force sensitive. Doesn't need his eyes at all. Can just deflect grenades or hits or whatever is coming at him, and it takes out multiple guys all at once. So he basically is. He's kind of a Jedi, like he's kind of Ahsoka or Anakin or whatever, can take out massive armies of bad guys, but not officially a Jedi. And so he's really, there are no Jedi in this movie, but he's kind of the stand-in, the closest thing we get.
Well, and his belief in the Force is kind of interesting in contrast to the rest of them, because the rest of them are, and not really mercenaries, but they're more soldiers of fortune. And basically it's like, I think they view him as kind of an outlier, basically. So it's interesting.
Yeah. Baze Malbus is the other guy that we see. And how would you kind of describe his character, his personality?
Physical, kind of heavy hitting, kind of in the same light that you kind of had Saw Gerrera, like this rebel, friend of the rebels, basically, to a point, but it's not in tune to the Force like Chirrut Imwe is, but they're friends. So
yeah. They're just a fun team to watch because they couldn't be more opposite as far as their approach to battle, and yet they're like best friends and have each other's backs. Like they protect each other a lot throughout the movie. I just really enjoyed watching the two of them. But so they, through a bunch of events and a bunch of fighting and stuff like that, Jen figures out how to get a hold of Saw Gerrera, and she brings these guys with her, and she finds out that Rook has been held captive by Saw, because I get the impression that Saw never really truly trusts this guy. Like, he obviously interrogates him using that weird alien creature.
Dude, how about that thing
that like sucks his brain, or like,
so
I don't
gross.
know. It was disgusting to watch. I remember being kind of terrified when I watched that in theaters. It was very very large and in charge in the movie theater, but anyways, extracts the information out of him, but doesn't want to let him go. Thinks he may be, double crossing him or whatever. So he has basically locked him up. Gerrera shows Jen the holo message that he got from her dad, and she gets very emotional in the scene. She's a great actress, by the way.
Right,
the girl that plays her, Felicity Jones, but she is crying, like hyperventilating almost when she sees her dad. She hadn't seen him since she was a little girl, 15 years prior. So it's this weird, crazy reunion, rush of emotions of like, I'm seeing my dad again for the first time, but he's in trouble and we got to save him. And, and the whole galaxy could be at stake. Like, it's an incredible surge of information she gets in about 30 seconds.
Sure.
And then, and she learns basically in this that she's the only one that sees this. It's her and Saw. And I don't think anyone else in that entire base has probably even seen the message. And she learns that there's a vulnerability in the Death Star that he put there on purpose, and has basically made a way for the rebels to take this thing down. And you have to get the schematics, the plans for the Death Star on a planet called Scarif. And that's about it. That's about all we learned from that message. And then the message and literally everything else in that city is completely destroyed a few minutes later, including the only other person that knew that information, which is Saw Gerrera. So she is the message at this point. There is no holo message. There's no thing to press play in front of any other person. She's the only one that knows this information,
right?
Which makes it kind of crazy after that.
What's interesting, and I've always found this interesting, like I remember whenever Luke shoots that single rocket into the Death Star, that hole, he has to hit that hole. It's no different than hunting womp rats. I got to, back home on Tatooine. But the idea that there is this flaw in the Death Star, I remember at the time thinking that's really stupid.
Yeah.
And then the second Death Star, are we going to get an explanation on the second Death Star? Why then on the second Death Star, it's not, we didn't leave a single hole on the Death Star, just a small hole. Well, now we left a hole big enough for us to fly multiple ships into on the second one.
Yeah.
So is there another spy movie coming? Rogue 2, Bothan Spies, probably Bothan Spies. This one's about these furry creatures that are Bothans that teach us to fly whole ships into the second Death Star.
Yeah.
Which looks awesome, by the way, but
so I explained to Jessica the significance of this movie at the end of it, and she's like, so they got the plans for the Death Star, and I said, yeah, it's not just about getting the plans. It's literally, it's about retroactively making A New Hope a better movie. Like they explained away one of the biggest beefs that people had with that movie, and that movie's nearly flawless to begin with, but that was one thing that people had a hard time believing. And so it basically made it so that makes perfect sense now. When you go back, and it changes the way you watch that movie. And so, yeah, it was interesting from that standpoint, but then that led immediately to her question of, so are they going to do that for the second Death Star? So like, explain how
Yeah, I don't know how I don't know how they're gonna pull that off. So
she's like, so did someone intentionally put a failsafe like in the second? I was like, I don't know. They just felt like they had to do it again, I guess, in that movie.
So funny.
So, anyways, they get her back to the rebel base. They obviously have to get her back and kind of explain this whole situation. Meanwhile, on the Death Star, sorry, we already covered that. Yeah, for some reason, Saw Gerrera sticks around and says, "I'm just going to go down with the ship." So the entire city, and I thought this was amazing, by the way, that like when they fire the Death Star, because Jessica was like, she's like, I thought the first planet to get blown up was
Coruscant?
No, the one that
on this
the Organas are from, Leia's planet.
Alderaan.
Like she's like, I thought the first planet to get blown up was Alderaan. And I said, well, it is. That happens, directly after this movie. Is they blow up an entire planet, but here they just fire like one of the many lasers or something like that.
Like just like a single blast.
Yeah, it doesn't take out the whole planet. It just takes out the entire city. So it's obviously extremely powerful to take out an entire city, like the size of Kansas City or whatever. But it's not taking out the entire planet. And we get to see Grand Moff Tarkin. Let's talk a little bit about the CGI in this movie. Yeah. So the guy that played Tarkin was deceased at this point. He was portrayed by Peter Cushing in episode 4. He was actually portrayed by Wayne Pigram in episode 3, which I don't remember him in episode 3. He must have had just a very brief scene. And in this movie, he's portrayed by Guy Henry, who's basically a stand-in for the CGI. And he is essentially just a CGI character. Think Jar Jar Binks, basically, but done a lot better than Jar Jar Binks. Well, I remember in 2016, even back then, looking at this thinking, he doesn't look quite real to me. Like he's almost there, but there's a kind of uncanny valley still going on.
Think about from then to now, CGI is really, the high end CGI is really, really good. But this was one of those where I remember watching it and it didn't take me out of the storytelling. Like there's certain CGI, I've talked about it before, like you watch it and it really takes you out of storytelling. This is more like, okay, well, I can live with this. Like it's fine.
Yeah.
I always liked Tarkin as well because I've always said that Tarkin is probably the most evil humanoid that has no powers in all of Star Wars. Like he doesn't have any powers. He's a regular looking dude. He's just a stone cold killer. Like he just, you know what I'm saying? Just whatever he needs to do, he's going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, he is responsible for the destruction of literally billions of people.
And he didn't even blink
on the planet of Alderaan. Yeah.
Yeah, he's not even. He could care less. Like, and he doesn't even blink. And it's whatever the Empire needs done, he's going to do it. So he's very evil.
My favorite line from that scene is, "You may fire when ready."
I know he's like very nonchalant. He's the kind of guy that would get protested. Like if the rebels were protesters with signs, they would be arrest Tarkin, arrest Tarkin now, lock him up. And instead, it's he would just shoot the rebels with the Death Star.
Yeah,
the protesters would be shot. The fake Star Wars protesters, not regular protesters, or real protesters.
I think either his CGI portrayal was so expensive to make, or maybe they were afraid that audiences would find it hard to believe that was a real person. But he's not really in a lot of scenes in this movie. I think he's in 2, maybe 3 scenes, and he's not shown face forward in a lot of those scenes either. They kind of limit the amount of time that you actually seen like the CGI character. But I gotta hand it to him, like when he speaks, like it looks like a real human moving his mouth. I think the tone of his skin, or there's something that's not quite, it's a little off to me as far as like being a real human, but he looks and moves pretty much like one. So it was pretty impressive at the time, even though I could kind of see some of the chinks.
He reminds me of Odo from Star Trek Deep Space Nine in the look of him a little bit on here. and Odo is a shapeshifter, so maybe Tarkin is just Odo, because maybe that's the skin tone.
Yeah.
I chased a rabbit there.
Okay, I'm good. I haven't seen that, so I can't comment.
You don't want to talk about Deep Space Nine now on here for no reason?
I'd love to if I'd seen it.
Yeah, not really. It's pretty boring.
So then it's a race to Edu. So Tarkin is basically telling Krennic that, hey, you've got a leaky faucet in your setup. Rook has defected, has told the rebels about our plans, and they're going to try to save Galen. So you need to get back there immediately. So it's a race. What's his name? Krennic gets there first, just barely, and barely beats them to the planet Edu.
Krennic is a lot like Hux in the way that he has flaws, he has some issues, whereas Tarkin is so put together, is steely. Krennic is like the rest of us. Krennic is nervous when he shouldn't be nervous. Not as nervous as Hux, because Hux really is the rest of us. You're in charge of the whole fleet. Oh gosh. Oh no, I'm Hux. But like Krennic is a little higher than that, and a little more put together than that, but not much, because he's still a stone cold killer, but he's still a guy that, Darth Vader can grab by the throat and choke out or whatever. So
Krennic has a bachelor's degree in villainy, and Hux has an associate's, and then and then Tarkin is master's level.
He's teaching those classes.
They're night classes, but he's teaching them.
Correspondence, old school correspondence. You mail them in, you do them, and then mail them back in.
Yeah, and then we all know Darth Vader has this PhD in scum.
He is the PhD. Dr. Vader.
So there's like three things going on in this scene. It's a very complicated scene. You've got Krennic and him like basically wanting to get Galen. He does this weird like thing where he's like, I want one of you to. He gets his whole team like. Galen and all of his science buddies, all of the nerds together, and it was like, okay, what one of you is responsible for leaking information to getting information about our plans out there off planet, and he ends up killing all of them because he's trying to show his superiority. And then he says, "I knew it was you the whole time, Galen. You're the mole. You're the one that's responsible for all this." And then so you've got that going on. Then you have Cassian, who is you're convinced up to this point that he's going to snipe him with his sniper rifle. He's going to shoot him and kill him, right? Which he's been ordered to do. And then the third thing you have going on is Jyn, and she's basically like spy, James Bond's attacking this thing head on and sneaking behind enemy lines to get. So she ends up actually on the platform with him when everything goes down. So the rebel bomber, or a fourth thing that comes in, I guess, is the rebel bombers come in, and I guess they're backup for Cassian, right? Just in case Cassian fails, they're just going to blow the whole facility up. Okay, is that your impression?
I think so. Like I basically, because they know that if nothing else, we've got to eradicate this situation. We've got a lot of people in one spot at the same time, so that would be a benefit to the rebels.
I really think it's possible that some of the rebels didn't truly trust Galen, like that they were like he was maybe like leading them in so that it could be a trap and they could be captured or killed.
Yeah, they still thought he was a possible bad guy.
Yeah, and I think others did believe him and did trust him, but knew that he was too much of a high value target. Like that they couldn't just protect him. Like they have to get the information out of him and then just make sure that he's not a player anymore. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think for all those reasons, they definitely want him to die so that they can just kind of seal that up and cover their tracks, so to speak.
Yeah.
So anyway, one of the bombers attacks and basically explodes this platform that they're on.
Yep.
And Scaling ends up dying in Jin's arms very tragically, and she escapes on their ship got basically crashed onto the planet. They were flying in too low or something, and they made up some kind of reason why they had to jump into different...
They get shot. No,
I don't think they're shot. I
No.
don't even think that they're known to be on the planet. I think they had to fly low so they could fly under the radar. I think that's what K2O was saying.
Yeah.
And so they sneak in, but then in so doing, they're like, pull up, and then they crash the ship.
Mhm.
And so they have to steal an Imperial cargo shuttle. Also reminded me a lot of Force Awakens, and end up getting away. So Krennic is summoned at that point by Darth Vader. This really cool scene. It's one of 2 scenes, I think, that we see Darth Vader in. I don't think he's in more than 2. And he has to face him face to face. I thought, honestly, Krennic was probably going to die in this scene.
Yeah, I thought it was too. I think he was surprised. He was also surprised when he didn't.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. He's like, I lived. Because at this point, I'm sure people know that when you're called into a private session with Darth Vader, the CEO of the company,
your death is imminent.
And so he does choke him, but doesn't kill him. He basically says, "I could have killed you."
Yep.
And then Krennic says, Krennic seeks Darth Vader's support for an audience with the Emperor, but Vader, that's when Vader chokes him and says, just plug the leaks. We don't need any more of this. Then, kind of the main impetus for the whole movie, Jin basically proposes this plan in front of everyone, and this was such an awesome mega cast of all your favorite not all your favorite, but a lot of your favorite Rebel characters.
Yeah,
we see. I don't know. They called him by a different name later on, but isn't that? It's a trap. I can't remember his name.
what can't I think of his name? Admiral Akbar.
Yeah, isn't that Akbar in the?
He's a Calamarian, but I don't know that it's him.
The Calamarian that's in the ship, in the attack ship that's above the planet.
But Akbar would have been around.
Akbar.
Akbar would have been around at this time. I mean, he would have been around.
They don't name many of the characters obviously in the scene, but that seemed to me like it was Akbar, like at the Admiral, and then there was another Calamarian in the actual attack, and that was definitely not Akbar because they were calling him by a different name. But anyway, I believe that's probably Akbar that's there. You see Bail Organa is there and actually has a few speaking lines, so it was cool to see Bail again.
Yeah. And
then of course Mon Mothma is there, and then of course Jin is doing a lot of the talking as well, and she's basically saying hey, there's this very critical thing in the Death Star that's been put there by my father. You have to believe me. And literally splits the room. Half of them are maybe even 3 different ways. Some people just don't believe her because there's no evidence. She's literally the only one that's seen this. Her dad's dead. Saw's dead. Literally anyone that's on any planet that they can ask about this is dead or didn't see the footage. Right. And so I think some people don't believe her. I think some people believe her, but think it's a fool's errand to try to steal these plans.
A waste of time.
And then there's this third group that's it's probably a suicide mission, but I'm in. And it's the same guys that we've already seen. So Cassian, these 2 other dudes, Baze Malvis and Chirrut, and some other guys that basically say we're going to go rogue. And so that becomes the name for the movie. As they're leaving the Rebel base to go to Scarif to actually steal these plans, they actually get caught. They're stealing the same Imperial ship that they stole from the previous planet, and they're like, "Hey, where are you going? You're not supposed to be. There's nothing on the manifest or the plans. Flight plans today for this ship to leave. What's your call sign?" And they're like, Rogue One, and that becomes the title for the movie, obviously.
There it is.
So they go just them. I don't know how many people are on that ship. 15, 20 people that are on that ship.
Yeah, I mean not many. So.
And they're basically going to try to pull this thing off. let's talk about that planet. So they go to Scarif, and this is one of the cooler planets as far as I think the foliage and the lushness of it reminded me a lot of Return of the Jedi. There's a really cool thing that I don't know that I'd seen. We see it a little bit in the force field stuff in like the later Star Wars movies, 8 and 9.
Yes.
Specifically 9 is a big one, but there, I don't know that I had seen a whole lot up to this point. Was there a scene like that in Force Awakens where there's like this massive shield that was like protecting a city or a planet? This is basically the Simpsons movie.
Yeah, that's true.
There's like this force field over the
whole planet.
Yeah, and
I mean, it's varying. There's just different things that have different shields on them. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
it definitely is unique.
It was cool.
Yeah.
I remember watching it in 2016, going like, "Wow, that's clever!" Like
smart.
The fact that you could basically barricade an entire. We had seen like, the Trade Federation like barricading a planet or something like that. Not allowing transport of goods or whatever. But this is a literal barricade. There's no way to get into that planet,
right?
Unless they open the door for you, basically. So it's basically a lock and key on the planet, which is kind of cool to think about. So they come in on their Imperial ship. They make it look like an actual ship or whatever. And K2SO I think it's K2SO is the one to say, hey, because he's an Imperial droid that they reprogrammed, and he says something to get them into the planet.
They have their call signs. They have the things that they need to be able to get through the barricade.
Yeah.
And then they're able to land and enter the base that way.
Yeah. Yeah, and they basically they're known to be arriving, so it's not like they're not greeted with bad guys, but the Imperial soldiers that greet them are immediately killed or knocked out. I don't think they show it, but they steal their clothes. It's very Star Warsian. Like you've seen this kind of thing with Han Solo and Luke before, where they knock a few stormtroopers out and put on their clothes. So they go in, and it's really handy and convenient that they have K2SO with them, because again, he's an Imperial droid. So he walks in and he's accompanied by a couple guys in these suits, and no one thinks any of the wiser for it. So they basically sneak in, and then from this point forward, this is awesome. This is awesome scenery. Honestly, the fights on the ground and the fights in the air, I think, are some of the best in the series. I really thought Rogue One was going to be kind of like second place, but I thought they really did this up pretty expensively.
Well, the scenery of where they filmed this at too made this scene perfect. So
yeah,
it's really good stuff.
It's like, I don't know where they shot it. We probably looked that up, but it reminded me of, it's very tropical. Like there's sand and lots of water, but also I guess this goes with tropical too, but like very foresty, like lots of trees and just lush greenery and stuff like that around. So it was very, very cool place to film. But anyway, there's a lot of fight and a lot of stuff that is hard to cover here on a podcast because I don't know. Do you have any like favorite like fight moments, like combat moments?
I feel like the stuff where
because this takes about 40 minutes, like a good 30 minutes of the movie is literally just action scenes, which is great. I loved it.
Well, I think that the cool thing about this is the surprise that Krennic gets in this, and that they're able to kind of pull off what no one thought. It's a heist situation, but it's not a heist. Chirrut, Imwe, and Baz Malbus are my two favorite parts of this thing, because they're able to do some things that you couldn't imagine them doing, and then when all hope is lost, Chirrut Imwe basically uses the Force to allow them to continue on. So
cool. I love that scene. Like he basically, like it's literal chaos on the planet, because I mean we kind of skipped over this, but like basically the Rebel Alliance gets wind of these guys going rogue and going in by themselves, and they route a number of their forces to assist them, to back them up. And so there's starfighting going on, dogfight, ships shooting at each other. There are troops on the grounds, but they're getting reinforcements. They have, for the longest time, they can't even get a ship in through the force field onto the planet. But one of the coolest scenes I've ever seen in a Star Wars movie, as far as like ship to ship combat, they disable the ship and then push that ship into another ship. Do you remember that part?
Yes.
They use one of their ships to literally nudge a ship into another ship,
right on,
which causes that ship to plummet and go straight down and basically crash directly into the force field, opening up a huge hole in the force field. So that's how they break in, which was really, really cool to watch. And they end up obviously getting a lot of troops transported down to the surface. There are thousands of people that die in the last 30 minutes of this movie.
Right, and I think that sets the tone for the fact that this is a suicide mission, essentially.
Yeah. But yeah, I started to say, so in the midst of all that chaos, there's literally blaster bolts going every which direction. Every 5 feet, there's a blaster bolt. And Chirrut basically does this like Zen thing where he just kind of quiets his mind. And, obviously he's blind, but he's, walking in, eyes closed, blindly into the line of fire, and just kind of very quietly and calmly just very slowly walks over to this switch that has to be flipped so they can get the transmission out and stuff like that. It was so cool to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Great scene. Then I guess we need to talk about the actual schematics themselves. So like Jin, K2SO dies very heroically. I love that scene where he sacrifices himself. He ends up taking like 40 shots to the body and finally ends up going down and ends up locking the door behind them. But they're kind of trapped in this IT room. It looks like basically like I work in IT, so it reminds me of like a server room, basically.
A server bay, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's just like this little bays of of information, like on all these drives, like they look like hard drives, and they have to find the right one. They get the K2SO helps them find it. They find the one where Galen had stored the information about the Death Star plans, and they have to they can't use the machine to get it because the computer gets shot or something weird happens, and so they have to jump out there and actually climb this thing and pull it out with their bare hands and then climb up to the top to get away. I thought all of that was really thrilling to watch.
They know how to set up a scene in Star Wars. Like the cool thing about the practical magic that Star Wars is really good at using to use actual sets, and they use CGI and a lot of stuff, but the idea of using an actual model or a set to build out has always been Star Wars' best trait. I mean, going all the way back to New Hope, and honestly, I remember being little and watching Empire Strikes Back and being like that set design is kind of what is, I don't know, the most foremost in my mind when I think about what Rogue One does on in that situation that you're talking about, and just the things they do. Even on Last Jedi used a lot of that too, like some of the set stuff that they used, especially when they were on what were they on? The ship that they were on whenever Phasma is fighting Finn and that stuff. So anyway, it's good stuff. Overall good stuff. The set design's awesome.
It feels iconically Star Wars, which I think was so important to having this movie be a hit with Star Wars fans. Shiny
technology that looks real, doesn't look like anything we see here, but then it also does look like things we see. It's like this weird, the people that create this stuff is unbelievable to me. So it's crazy.
Yeah. And then I guess kind of the last big thing before the destruction of this base is we see Jin is all alone. She leaves Cassian behind, which I thought was actually kind of unique for the series.
Yeah.
I like most of the Star Wars movies is like no soldier left behind. We got to go back for Chewie or Han or whatever. This is like she just leaves him, which I thought that was kind of cool. It shows you the importance of we got to get these plans no matter what the cost. And she leaves him behind. She's all alone on the top of this huge tower. And who's going to show up? Obviously, we all know it. It's going to be Krennic. And so he comes up the elevator, whatever it is, and points a blaster at her. And you're like, okay, this is it. She's dead. Like, she's on the edge of this thing. This is the end of not just Jyn Erso, but it's the end of the plans, because he's going to pick up the plans and destroy them or whatever. Cassian comes in. He's not dead. He ends up shoots him, and I think leaves him alive. I think they leave him for dead, like that he's just gonna. They know he's gonna die. Then they pull the trigger thing, whatever, the switch, and they have an open connection now to the Rebel command ship, because the
dial-up modem is straight to the Rebels.
The dish is properly aligned, and
they
it goes
use
out
AOL.
the top. There's obviously the force field's been destroyed, so they get the transmission out to the ship, and then basically die in a blaze of glory, because the next thing we see is the Death Star comes around and arrives just in time to basically destroy the entire base, including Krennic. Like they don't have no qualms about killing their own.
Yeah, they don't care. They don't care, pal.
And so Krennic, Cassian, Jyn, all of the Imperial forces, all the Rebel forces on the ground, everyone dies. Kills literally everyone on that planet, on that base. The Rebel fleet are trying to get away, and I thought at this point they were just going to get away, but they have trouble.
But then you forgot. The next segment is A New Hope.
Yep, they have to line up to A New Hope,
which I felt like was awesome. Like, I remember watching that in theater, and it was really, really cool. Like, it was like this awesome payoff. It was kind of how like the payoff you had whenever you watched, and when you slogged your way through all the two other prequels. You slogged your way through Phantom Menace, and then you somehow made it through Attack of the Clones, and then you're like, well, I've got to watch Revenge of the Sith, because I know that he's going to turn into Vader at the end of it. And that's the payoff. Well, the big payoff for this is that the end of this movie syncs up with the beginning of A New Hope.
Yeah, it's actually kind of, I thought what you were going to say was it's making me, in 2016, it made me feel the way I feel today with Clone Wars Season 7.
Yeah, and that's where I had that thought too, but I didn't want to be too on the nose with it, but yeah.
Well, and we don't need to, those are separate episodes. We're not going to spoil what happens and what's happening right now in Clone Wars Season 7. But it is one of those things where, like, man, they're going to hand this off. And they did it perfectly. I mean, seamlessly. I couldn't believe how perfect it was.
But Vader, this thing at the end with Vader.
Dude.
Oh, it's mega.
Talk about that.
Dude, well, I'll tell you right now, like, I'm sure on YouTube, there's a clip of Vader just wrecking shop here, like going through those technicians with the hilarious, wedge-shaped hats on. And they're like, here's the plans. Take the USB port, run. Oh my God. Here's the thumb drive. Pew, 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 ow.
It's literally the worst baton race you've ever seen in history.
Oh my gosh. And then it's like getting killed. And
dude, it was so great. It's so great to watch, because we always knew that, James Earl Jones wasn't in actual suit; he was just the voice. But like, we knew this old Darth Vader was always this extremely powerful, unstoppable force. And in Rogue One, we see some of the most vicious, just mowing through dudes that we see in any of the movies. It was awesome. Cool. I remember seeing it in theaters with a packed audience. Ryan had already knew what was going to happen. I was sitting right next to him, but he was very good about not spoiling anything. And the audience literally erupted during that scene. Like, everyone was screaming. People were laughing and clapping. I mean, it was just like the theater literally blew up everywhere, probably across the nation and world when people saw that scene. It was awesome. It's such a great payoff. And then speaking of CGI, we see Leia, which I was not expecting to see that. I thought it was cool that we got to see Vader, and I was very happy. And I thought, hey, we got to see Vader and Tarkin. If that's all we get from this movie as far as known characters,
Right.
I'd be totally good with that. But yeah, literally the very last seconds, the few last frames of the movie, we see is Princess Leia receiving the plans from that, you know, that last drone that delivered the plans to her, and that was so cool to see too. Again, CGI, even in 2016, I remember not being totally convinced, but she looked so similar to that 1977 Carrie Fisher that it was just awesome that they put it in there. I thought
it was really cool.
like they didn't have to do that, but it was really cool that they did. So
it was awesome.
So immediately following, that's the end of Rogue One. Immediately following that movie, I was like, this is too good. I can't not watch the first 5 minutes of A New Hope. So I because it's on Disney Plus and we just have free access to it, I immediately typed in A New Hope, enter, and then watched the first 5 minutes of that movie. And Jack, I don't know if you did that, but it is a seamless transition. It is literally like it was shot by the same director. I can't believe how close it looks to that original movie. The way that they shot the end of Rogue One was with the utmost love and care. I couldn't believe how spot on it was.
It's awesome.
So, because it literally takes place seconds after the event. They are being pursued by Darth Vader's Star Destroyer at the end of Rogue One. Roll credits, open up A New Hope, and the Star Destroyer is chasing them and suctions them in, tractor beam, and he's on the ship talking to Princess Leia, and Princess Leia's like, I don't have no idea what you're talking about.
How far is Scarif? Scarif must be close to Tatooine, right?
Oh yeah, I didn't think about that, because they didn't get away very far. Like they hadn't.
No, I mean it's got to be close, right?
Yeah, and the next thing we know is C-3PO and R2-D2 are getting in their shuttle pod. Yeah, well, that's interesting.
I think it's got to be close.
So, yeah. I need to mention one more scene. It's going back to the scene where they were trying to get the plans from the server room, for lack of a better term. And they were like, it wasn't K2SO necessarily that pointed out. He's like, it's in this area or something like that. And Cassian is like going through the names of the files. Yes. And he's like, this one's called, blah, 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 and blah, 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 and, all these made up names, whatever. He's like, this one's called Stardust. And she goes, that's it. That's the one. And I had a little bit of an emotional moment. I didn't cry, but I did have a moment where I teared up just a little bit, because that was her dad's nickname for his daughter.
That's cool.
Yeah, throughout the whole movie, he calls her Stardust. He calls her that. We hear that term 3 times. We hear it. He calls her Stardust in the opening scene of the movie when she's a little girl. She's a little 8-year-old girl. Mm-hmm. We hear it again when he dies. He says, "You'll always be my Stardust," or whatever. "I love you, Stardust." And then the third time is at the very end of the movie when they find the file's name Stardust, and she knows that it's for her. So
cool. Little Stardust.
By the way, speaking of Stardust, I looked this up and I was looking at the cast as we were kind of finishing up our discussion. There's a 4-year-old Jin that is in one scene and an 8-year-old Jin that is in another scene in the movie, and they are played by sisters. So the 8-year-old Jin is played by Bo Gadsden, and the 4-year-old Jin is played by Dolly Gadsden. So I thought that was kind of cute.
Cool.
So
cuckoo.
Really good performances all around. Even the characters that aren't in the movie that much, like Bodhi Rook. I thought he was portrayed by Reese Ahmed, and he's really, really good. I wasn't familiar with any of these actors for the most part, except obviously Forrest Whitaker. Everyone's seen him in something,
right?
And then of course you don't see him in the flesh, but Alan Tudyk. But I wasn't familiar with a lot of these other guys. Diego Luna is Cassian. Ben Mendelsohn is Krennic. I think he's done a few things since then, probably a couple things before. Donnie Yen. Oh, Mads Mikkelsen. Obviously, probably most people have seen Mads Mikkelsen in something. Usually as a bad guy. Had you seen Felicity Jones? What is she known for?
Oh, let's find her. Felicity Jones. If Amanda were listening, she would be able to break down and tell her. Is she a British actress? Yes, she's a British actress.
Previously, she had been portrayed as Jane Hawking in
North Anger Abbey.
Theory of Ebony.
That's where I've seen her. Okay. North Anger Abbey. She's also was in The Amazing Spider-Man 2.
As which character?
The Tempest, and then
she's Felicity is Felicia. Strangely enough, she plays Felicia Hardy in that. She has a very small role in that movie.
She's been on a lot of stuff, so.
She is stunning, not just to look at, but as an actress, she's
a great actress. You're right. Yeah. So.
She is 36 as of today, so she was probably about 31 as they were shooting this movie, but portraying a 25-year-old. She looks young in the movie, but she's actually in her 30s. So,
well, very cool. She's a good one.
So yeah, one of the greats from Star Wars, man. I will always remember that movie very fondly.
Yeah, and I hope that they make a sequel. I know I would love to see a Rogue 2. I mean, it'd be phenomenal if they could just get these actors back in something.
Rogue 2 is going to have to be the Bothans, right?
Just get this cast back together. Maybe we could upload them all into androids. It could be an all androids movie, an all droids movie. Rogue 2, semicolon droids.
Cool. Sounds
we're back. Tagline.
Colin, we're back.
We're back. And it makes no sense.
What else have you been watching on Disney Plus? Anything you want to
I want to give a pitch to a classic movie, Yellowstone Cubs. You want to see something that's just kind of ridiculous, go on Disney Plus and type in Yellowstone Cubs, watch 10 or 15 minutes of it. You'll be glad you did. It's insane.
So it's on Disney Plus?
Yeah, it's just it's old school Disney stuff. And it's just pretty hilarious. It's these animals, and this guy does some voiceover work on it, and it's Disney. It's Disney in the golden era. The same time they were doing Davy Crockett stuff, the same time they were doing Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, they were also doing Yellowstone Cubs. Animals as actors, and Animal steals a boat. The bear steals a boat. An actual bear is behind the steering wheel of this boat, and it's shot in Yellowstone Park. So,
okay,
there you go, Yellowstone Cubs. You'll be glad you watched 10 minutes of it.
So this episode will go live just the day before May the 4th. So I think the timing this timing is about as good as we could have gotten it. Speaking of more Star Wars, we will be back with more Star Wars next week for the finale of the Clone Wars. And I don't just mean this season. I mean all seasons of the Clone Wars is wrapping up on Friday as you hear this, if you're hearing this right after we record it. So Friday is a big day for Star Wars fans, and it's the weekend of May 4th. So I think that's perfect.
We need to take a long hiatus from Star Wars after next week. We have, and honestly, it'll probably be Mandalorian second season by the time we come back to something Star Wars, I'd say.
Yeah, I doubt I watch anything. I mean, I'll probably watch other shows, but not for review. Like I do. I want to take some time off of Star Wars. I said that a couple weeks ago, as far as like things I'm watching that are Star Wars. I just watched a ton of Clone Wars over the last few months, but I eventually want to get to Star Wars Rebels, but I probably won't do that until maybe the end of the summer because I want to take some time off from that. I don't know that we'll review those. I think that's more just kind of something I'll keep people updated on and kind of chat about it a little bit. I know you've seen some of the episodes. You haven't seen every episode?
I probably watched a total of season 1 and then maybe half of season 2 of it probably.
Okay.
They're going. You know what? I'm really game. I'm really game to do. You mentioned High School Musical, the musical, the high school series show, whatever the title was. I can't remember.
Yeah.
I'm interested in revisiting the High School Musical movies.
Okay.
and doing an episode. Start out with High School Musical 1, and maybe we do it in consecutive weeks. Maybe we do 1, 2, and 3 back to back to back, week wise.
Okay.
Bring the Youngsmans back on.
Yeah.
Bring their professionalism. At some point, I'd like to get in person and be able to do things together as a group, but you know how that goes. So,
and that will be my first viewing of the first 2 movies.
Oh,
I
even better.
I've seen, strangely enough, I've seen the 3rd movie. I've not seen 1 or 2. So.
Well, I would vote then that after next week's Clone Wars, we do High School Musical 1.
Okay.
Maybe we try to have them on multiple weeks. I don't know if we add Steven back into the mix as well. Maybe he's not on the interstate this time.
Yeah.
But anyway, we could do it that way. It'd be fun.
Okay. So yeah. Okay. So your assignments, dear listener. Clone Wars season 7 finale is going to be next week. I'm hoping to have a guest on. I don't want to say specifically yet. I'll tell you off air because I don't know if it's going to happen. But yeah, I'm hoping to have a guest on next week to help us kind of wrap up the Clone Wars. And then 2 weeks from now, maybe have even more different guests on to talk about some High School Musical 1. Would be awesome. So cool. Well, thanks for listening to the show. As always, if you want to write into the show, write us at disneyplusreviews@hotmail.com. Let us know what you want to hear about, or give us a review on something that you've been watching on Disney Plus. Maybe turn us on to something that maybe we should be watching as well. So we will see you next week for probably the last time we talk about Star Wars in a while, which is Clone Wars season 7 finale. We'll talk to you then.